Your amendment.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I seek leave to move Animal Justice Party amendments numbers 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 and 10 on sheet C 2025-332D in Globo. Thank you. Right now, children between the ages of 12 and 18 can obtain a so-called miner's firearm permit that enables them to access and use guns. This is unnecessary and it is unacceptable.
2 minutes later.
Mr Deputy President, I rise to speak against this amendment because it's totally ill-conceived and totally wrong. I rise on behalf of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party to oppose this amendment put forward by the Animal Justice Party. Specifically, this amendment seeks to remove the explanatory note in the Firearms Act that clarifies that while firearms licences are generally issued only to persons aged 18 and over, minors may be granted firearms permits under Section 32 of the purposes of receiving safe instruction and participating in competitive shooting events. At first glance, this may appear to be a minor procedural adjustment, but let me be absolutely clear. This amendment is nothing of that sort. It is a direct and ideological attack on the very foundations of a long-standing and respected tradition in New South Wales. The responsible teaching, supervision and participation of young people in shooting sports and hunting culture. It's an attack on a mother who goes to the rifle range on Saturday morning to enjoy a rimfire shoot together. It's an attack on the long-term tradition of shooting in schools, shooting that teaches discipline and responsibility and has been undertaken responsibly for over a century. It's also an attack on families, communities and indeed on the culture and heritage of our Indigenous peoples who have maintained hunting as an intrinsic part of their cultural practice for millennia and who pass it down to their children and grandchildren. The Animal Justice Party's approach exemplifies a deep misunderstanding, if not outright disregard, of the cultural, social and practical realities of rural and regional life in our state. Hunting and shooting are not mere hobbies. They are for many an essential part of family life, community engagement and education in personal responsibility, marksmanship, safety and respect for the natural environment. They are also deeply entwined with the cultural identity of Aboriginal communities, for whom hunting is not just a recreational activity but a sacred practice that maintains connection to country, heritage and knowledge of the land. To attack the ability of young people to learn these skills is to sever a link to that cultural knowledge. The explanatory note in question provides clarity on a balanced and responsible system that has existed in New South Wales for decades. It acknowledges that while firearms licences are primarily intended for adults, exemptions must exist under strictly regulated circumstances to allow minors to participate in safe instruction and competitive shooting. Under Section 32, minors who obtain permits must do so under the direct supervision of licensed adults. Under the supervision of licensed adults. We're listening to the lies coming out of the AJP, it's just monumental. This is a model of responsible education and oversight. It is precisely this structure that ensures young people are taught not only how to use firearms competently, but how to respect the law, understand safety procedures and develop a measured and responsible approach to firearm ownership. The AJP's amendment would remove this explanatory note. On its face, one might think this is a simple textual change, but in reality it undermines decades of powerful legislative balance, opens the door to misinterpretation and signals hostility towards lawful culturally embedded practices. It sends a clear message that the AJP wishes to infantilise our rural youth, prevent the intergenerational transfer of skills and erode long-standing traditions in shooting and hunting. The AJP has chosen to use this context to pursue a narrow ideological goal, the restriction of lawful, supervised and culturally important recreational activity. This, at its core, is the cultural bigotry, racist and abuse of the legislative process, using the momentum of one bill to achieve ends that have no direct relation to terrorism or public safety. From a policy perspective, this amendment is both unnecessary and counterproductive. The current Firearms Act already provides strict conditions under which minors may be issued firearms permits. These conditions include mandatory supervision, education in firearms safety, and limits on the type of firearms that may be used. Far from being a loophole, this framework is an exemplar of how public policy can balance access and safety. We must also consider the broader implications for Indigenous communities. Hunting is an integral part of cultural practice, sustenance and community life for Aboriginal people in New South Wales. Traditional knowledge is transmitted through generations, often starting in childhood, under careful guidance of elders. There will be ignorant bigots who say that using a firearm is not traditional. This tradition is about hunting, not about the method or the technology used. To say you must use traditional hunting tools such as boomerangs and spears is racist and denying that our Indigenous people's cultural practices have moved into the 21st century and use 21st century technology such as firearms. The amendment proposed by the Animal Justic Party would impede this transmission of cultural knowledge by seeking to remove recognition of minors' permits. The party is effectively attempting to legislatively sever young people from their essential cultural pathways. In doing so, they demonstrate a lack of respect for the deep traditions and rights of Indigenous Australians, a particularly concerning stance in a modern, culturally aware society. The attack is not limited to Indigenous practices. It extends into the lives of countless non-Indigenous families for whom recreational shooting, hunting and competitive marksmanship are a central part of family and community identity. Across New South Wales, both rural and city, youth participate in rifle clubs, clay target competitions and supervised hunting trips. These activities teach discipline, responsibility, ethical conduct and respect for the environment. They also provide meaningful pathways for young people who might otherwise be disconnected from the structured, supervised activities. To deny young people these opportunities under the guise of reform is quite frankly socially regressive. Furthermore, there is no evidence to suggest that the current system has led to an increase in firearm-related harm amongst minors. To the contrary, decades of experience show that minors who participate under supervised conditions are among the most responsible and law-abiding members of the shooting community. The safety record of licensed youth shooters in New South Wales is exemplary, and the regulations surrounding minors' permits ensure that any risks are meticulously managed. The Animal Justic Party's amendment ignores the reality entirely. It is also necessary to highlight the broader legislative principle at stake. Lawmaking in New South Wales must be evidence-based, proportionate and respectful of cultural and social norms. It must not be guided by ideology or desire to score political points at the expense of communities. This amendment falls on all of these counts. It is ideologically motivated, unnecessary from a policy standpoint and dismissive of cultural realities. It is in effect an assault on personal freedom, family engagement and intergenerational knowledge transfer. From a practical perspective, the explanatory note of the Firearms Act does not confer any new rights. It merely clarifies the existing provisions. Removing it introduces ambiguity into the law, making it harder for parents and educators and law enforcement officers to interpret and apply the legislation consistently. This is a recipe for confusion, not safety. Responsible instruction for minors will not be facilitated by ambiguity. It will be simply hindered. In considering the broader impact, one must also reflect on the social and psychological consequences for rural youth. Young people who have grown up participating in hunting and shooting sports form their sense of responsibility, confidence and ethical conduct around these activities. To disrupt this pathway is to deny them formative experiences that teach patience, respect, teamwork and accountability. Moreover, this amendment comes at a time when urban-centric ideologies continue to dominate the political discourse of this state, if not the whole of Australia. Far too often the voices and lived experiences of regional and rural communities are marginalised. The Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party will not stand idly by while ideological inner-city agendas threaten to erode the cultural fabric of rural New South Wales. Hunting and shooting are not just recreational pursuits, they are part of the identity of our communities, integral to local economies and foundational to the responsible, ethical stewardship of the land. The Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party will oppose this amendment unequivocally. We will continue to defend the rights of law-abiding citizens to engage in responsible, supervised and culturally significant hunting and shooting activities. We will continue to protect pathways through which young people learn respect, responsibility and safety with firearms. And we will continue to stand for the communities of New South Wales whose cultural identity, heritage and way of life are inseparable from the responsible use of firearms. Mr Deputy President, I urge every member in this House to reflect carefully on the consequences of this amendment and reject it.